Welcome back to another Soul Powerful Wellness Collective session. I am Dr. Makita Moore, the CEO and founder of the Soul Powerful Wellness Collective, where our mission is to bring you mental and spiritual health tools, training, skills, and support in a safe virtual community setting. If you're currently a member, welcome back. And if you have not joined the Wellness Collective yet, go ahead and visit drmakita.com/SOL to join the collective today. So today we are talking about internal family systems. And this was a concept that I was maybe about a year ago, I was introduced to, and it provided me personal clarity on my own understanding of self, as well as in particular developing self-compassion to promote healing, as well as compassion for others and how they're responding to me. So it helped to free me of expecting certain treatment from others, as well as help me to have more compassion for how I was treating myself. So my hope is that as we learn this system, we can apply it to ourselves and how we interact with ourselves, as well as how we're interacting with others in the world. Oops. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with some grounding meditation, just to transition us into open learning mind. So we can go ahead and if you're comfortable, you can bring your eyes to close. Begin to bring yourself into a good meditative posture with a nice tall spine, either sitting up tall in a chair or lying down. And in this moment, just go ahead and bring your focus to the now. And any thoughts that might be trying to occupy your mind, let's go ahead and give ourselves permission to be here in this moment, and anything else can be handled afterwards. Let's go ahead and bring our awareness to our breath. And just notice your natural inhales and exhales as you settle down into this moment. Aware of your body in this time, in this space. Aware of where you are on this day, this Saturday morning. And we'll go ahead and enter into some breathing to help us relax even further. Bring our minds into a state of calm and openness. So when you're ready, I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose, breathing in nice and deep. And then slowly release it out of the mouth. And just feel that sense of relief that comes from grounding ourselves in the present moment and bringing that calmness to the body and the mind. Let's repeat that a few more times. So when you're ready, take a deep breath in and then release it out. Feeling relaxed, feeling at ease. On this next breath, we're going to breathe in to go in and identify any stress, any barriers, any resistance, any pain, any tension within our physical vessel, or anything that we no longer want to carry forth with us physically or emotionally. And on that exhale, we will release that. So take a moment just to check in with your mind, body, spirit. and notice any signs of imbalance. Anything that might be disturbing or distracting you. When you're ready, let's take a deep breath in, allowing that breath to go in and to capture. And as we exhale, we can cleanse ourselves of any thoughts, feelings, energies that no longer serve us, and settle more into a feeling of gratitude for this day, gratitude for life, gratitude for new knowledge that brings forth the wisdom that is within us, allowing us to walk more in our truth and to shine our light as we express ourselves authentically, whole, healed, and happy. Let's take one more deep breath in, acknowledging ourselves as source, our expansiveness, and all of the sources of support and protection that are always with us. And as we release, we can bring our palms together at our heart center as we settle back into our bodies. We can bow in acknowledgement of one another. The light within me sees and honors the light within each and every one of you. Namaste. Ashe. Ashe, ashe, ashe. We can slowly begin to bring movement to our arms. Let's see. Allow our eyes to open and transition into this space where we give gratitude for all the tools that are available to assist us in our journey, both the tools that we'll receive through teachings, but also those that we will receive intuitively. And I always want to remind you all that you are connected to source intelligence. You have divine wisdom within you that you always have access to. Everything that you need, everything that you desire, it is within. You have all the materials. A big part of this is unlearning the limited version that we've been conditioned to believe that we are, and really tapping into the truth of who we are, which is these beautiful, expanded, powerful beings. And ultimately, that means aligning ourselves with the energy of true unconditional love, right? And in that space of true unconditional love, one, we treat ourselves well. We allow ourselves to pursue our dreams. We trust ourselves in the pursuit of those dreams. And we also can love others as they are in the pursuit of becoming their best versions of themselves. So the more we can align ourselves with this energy of love, and love has boundaries, you know, and love is firm, and love is strong, and love is a lot of beautiful things. Um, the more we can align ourselves with the energy of love, the more we can allow ourselves to show up as an authentic power. So I hope that what we learned today can assist us in that journey in helping us to better understand ourselves and this world that we live in. All right, so let's get into it on internal family systems. So I'm just going to abbreviate it as IFS throughout this presentation. So internal family systems is a psychotherapy approach developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz in the 1980s. And the premise of this approach is that the human mind is comprised of different subpersonalities, or we will call these parts. And each of these has unique qualities, beliefs, emotions, and they're going to play different roles. And I'm going to post the slides as well in the Discord once this presentation is over too. These parts of us can either be in conflict or harmony. Right? Our goal is for them to be in harmony, but until we really understand these parts, they can be in conflict. And that's what causes us conflict, It's because we're not in harmony with oneself. So how it works. So in a IFS session, the therapist is going to help the individual to understand the different parts and integrate them together. The goal of IFS is to promote self-awareness, self-compassion, and healing, right? Awareness of all the parts, compassion for the roles that all the parts are playing, which will help to promote the healing process. By understanding all these parts, the goal is for the individual to achieve a more balanced and integrated sense of self, right? We're no longer rejecting or fighting against any of our parts. We are integrated and recognizing how all these parts are working together. Given the, and once I explain more about what this approach is like, but given the holistic nature of this approach, it can be applied to a wide range of psychological challenges, including trauma, anxiety, depression, relationship difficulties, work conflicts, transitions in life, pretty much everything, because in every situation in life, every aspect of life, there's going to be these different parts at play. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go through the different parts. Okay, so there are 4 different parts. So we have the self, we have the managers, we have the firefighters, and then we have the exiles. Okay, so we're going to start with self. And the whole goal of IFS is to have the individual operate more from the space of self. So we can see the self as a source of wisdom, compassion, and healing, right? So, our common language here is like higher self, right? Or that kind of like that crown chakra energy. Some words that can be used to describe the self is calm, right? This is the part of you that remains steady and composed even in the face of challenges. So I don't know if you guys have ever noticed during your healing journey that maybe a situation that would have had you all rattled up, you were kind of able to handle it from a place where you felt more calm and you were more of the observer. That's the self at play, right? The self is also curious in that it allows us to look at different aspects of ourselves from a place of curiosity rather than judgment. Okay, so this is like that mindfulness, right? When we're able to observe things without judgment. And that allows us to see what is really there versus what our ego is trying to show us or to hide from us. Um, the self is also described as a space of clarity. Because it is taking this unbiased, objective approach, we're able to free ourselves of different distortions that the ego might try to throw out. The self is also a compassionate approach, right? In that it allows us to look at ourselves or other people or other situations from this space of love, right? Oh, excuse me. Got a sneeze trying to come on through. But from this space of compassion, right? Not defensiveness, not judgment, but compassion, which is kind of like this unconditionally loving space that's very understanding, that's seeking to understand versus to judge. The self also is also described as a sense of connectedness, right? Because when you feel connected to your own inner world and you're able to be connected to all the parts of you, it's also going to reflect to you outside, right? So as above, so below, as within, so without. And especially when we're able to connect to our higher self, we realize that sometimes the wisdom that we receive from our higher self seems to come from places that we haven't even directly experienced, but we just have a sense of inner knowing. And that can give us that sense of connectedness to the universe. And other words that can be used to describe the self include confidence, courage, creativity, and confidentiality. Confidentiality in that this is something that you're having internally, but it gives you that sense of safety, right? It's like that compassionate friend who isn't going to see, your shadows and your trauma and your drama, just go run and tell somebody or to judge you about it. But no, it's creating a safe space for you to be able to share and explore self. Okay, so that's the self. This is the goal in IFS is to help us to operate more from the space of the self. Okay. And now we're going to go over the three other parts that when we haven't really built this awareness, we tend to operate more from these three other parts. And as I go through these parts, I want you to think about different scenarios, or if there's a specific part that tends to be more of how you respond to challenges or conflicts in your life. Let me start with exiles, okay? Because the firefighters and the managers are basically working to take care of, a typo right there. Take care of the exiles. So we'll start with the exiles. So the exiles carry the emotional pain and the traumas that we might have. This is like our shadows, right? These are the young and often vulnerable parts of who we are. Okay, so when in therapy, when we talk about those core beliefs, like, oh, I'm not good enough, or no one loves me, or no one understands me, or I'm not attractive enough, right? That's that exile part of us. And there's going to be situations that are going to make that exile wake up, or you can call it the wounded child. It's going to wake up and it's going to be hurt, right? A situation's going to happen and the exile's going to be like, oh, this is more evidence that I'm not good enough. This is more evidence that no one likes me. This is more, it's going to be very reactive to those things. Okay. Exiles are typically hidden from awareness by the managers and the fighters. Now, I'll explain what those are to avoid overwhelming our emotional experiences. However, when we can become aware of what our exiles are, we can notice like, oh no, this is the exile coming up right now. This isn't really what's happening in this moment. It just triggered my exile. Okay, so the exile is that wounded, traumatized part of ourselves. Okay. All right, so now let's go back to the managers. All right, so the managers are the proactive are the proactive parts of us that often take charge to avoid vulnerable feelings or potential harm. Because their job is, I'm going to try to make a life that's so safe that I don't have to worry about it even evoking the exile, right? So they tend to be organized, they plan ahead, they strive for perfection, right? Because if I create a perfect environment, then I don't have to worry about my exile being triggered. So the managers aim to maintain control, prevent vulnerability, and protect the individual from potential emotional pain. They might employ strategies like perfectionism, self-discipline, or intellectualizing to manage situations. Okay. So again, be thinking about, as I go through these different characters, be thinking about which of these stand more out to how you approach challenges. All right, so now let's talk about the firefighters. Okay, so the firefighters, so we know that the managers are more proactive. They're trying to create an environment so that way the exile isn't awakened or triggered. Now, the firefighters, these are more reactive and impulsive. They respond to immediate threats or overwhelming emotions by using distraction or numbing behaviors, right? So firefighters work to extinguish the emotional fire by diverting the attention away from the distressing thing. Now, these behaviors of firefighters can tend to cause more problems like substance abuse, binge eating. We talked about emotional eating a few sessions ago, impulsive behaviors, fighting, rushing out of meetings, panic attacks, all those kind of reactive behaviors. They're trying to immediately get rid of the problem. They don't care about the consequence. They're just trying to get rid of being emotionally triggered. Okay. All right. So those are the parts. So I want you to think about between the managers, again, those are the proactive ones, trying to create this perfect environment so that way the exile doesn't wake up. The firefighters who are just responding and reactive in that moment. And then you have the exile, which is that trauma, that pain. So I want you to kind of begin to think about, and then the higher self, the self. So I want you to begin to think about situations in which you've maybe seen these different parts come to play. Okay. So I want to give you guys an example of how this might look in a therapeutic setting when it comes to, let's say, depression. And then if anyone wants to offer a personal example, we'll walk through a scenario to identify these different parts. Okay. So in the context of depression, and depression meaning prolonged periods of sadness, low self-esteem that might cause disruption to daily activities, might cause a change in your interests, sleep patterns, eating patterns. It's a whole emotional and physical condition that impedes on your sense of happiness and functionality in life. Okay, so in the context of depression, the goal of IFS is to recognize these internal parts and how they are promoting or protecting the depressive symptoms. Okay, so the therapist will help the client to assess the different parts of them, right? From the perspective of self, to help to build that sense of curiosity, compassion, and calmness. So that way, in order for us to notice why am I depressed, what are the contributors, the emotional, spiritual, cognitive contributors to my depression, I want to be able to look at those from a place of non-judgment. Okay. So we want to be able to access that higher self as well as accessing that higher self to help us to make better decisions. So let's say I'm feeling depressed and I really don't want to do anything. It's so hard for me to get out of bed. Well, if I can call on my higher self and maybe my goal for today could just be taking a shower. Can I let my higher self will me to take a shower and that will be enough? Right? Or can I will myself to just put on some music? Can I call on that higher energy of support to just put on some uplifting music, even though the sadness is still there. Okay. Um, IFS for depression is also going to focus on looking at the exiles, right? This means actually examining those unprocessed emotions and those past traumatic experiences. It's still surprising. Well, it's not surprising, but there are so many experiences that we don't realize how traumatic they were to us. We don't realize how hurtful they were to us. I had a client, she was describing some things that her mother had done to her in childhood. And I was like, you realize that's abuse, right? And she didn't realize how abusive it was to have had these things done to her. So, when we just have to accept that we all have exiles. And once we accept that we have these exiled parts of us, we can then begin to process those emotions of those experiences. Okay. Another aspect is transforming that inner critic, right? Sometimes that inner critic can come in the form of that manager, right? So, one aspect of a manager might be perfectionism. I'm going to be perfect so that way I can avoid rejection. But every time I go in front of the mirror, I'm always nitpicking everything about myself. When I do a homework assignment, it's not good enough. I studied for hours, but I'm still talking so negatively in my head about my ability to pass this test. That's an inner critic, right? So we want to acknowledge that inner critic is trying to support us because it has inner fears. So instead of us being so mad at the inner critic, we need to recognize, okay, the inner critic was trying to protect me because it has fears of its own, right? Instead of us judging ourselves for that inner critic. Okay. And the goal is to work towards self-compassion and self-acceptance. We also want to balance the protective parts, right? So there might be parts of us that focus on numbing or avoidance. And we want to bring balance to those, right? So if I have a fear, so I know for me, one of my fears was judgment by others. So I used to avoid taking pictures. I used to avoid public speaking. But all that did was grow that inner critic. All it did was grow those inner fears. So I had to start putting myself in situations I didn't feel protected. I felt very vulnerable. I felt very unsafe because my higher self knew that speaking in front of people, you're not in danger. My higher self knew that. My inner critic still was trying to protect me from that. And my ex-out self was still freaking out. But the more and more I put myself in those situations, and the more I would allow my higher self to speak positive affirmations over me and tell me to breathe and all these things, it would help me to now transform that experience to where I could see the reality and that I'm fine. Nothing bad is happening. Right. So we want to begin to balance those protective parts. And that means sometimes you're not going to feel safe, but you have to do it anyways, because that's you getting outside of that comfort zone. And then the last part is promoting integration and harmony, right? We want to be able to integrate all of our parts into this balanced internal system, because there's going to be times for these parts, but we want to be able to utilize them in a balanced way, right? And the more we can bring ourselves, all these parts into balance, the more we can reduce those depressive symptoms, because we're not engaging in criticism and judgment and guilt. And we're also engaging in activities that are going to promote our healing. We're engaging in mental perspectives that are going to promote us seeing ourselves from a place of love and compassion. And we're engaging in behaviors that are going to support us physically getting better and getting out of that depressive trap. Okay, so this is just one example for the case of depression. And now I want to open space if anybody wants to share any scenarios or any situations that came to mind, and we can together, or if you can already identify the different parts, the manager, the firefighter, the exile, and the self, if you want to go ahead and give that. So if anybody wants to give a personal example, you don't have to go into fine detail about everything, but if anybody wants to try to apply IFS to a personal example, feel free to unmute.
I can definitely recognize the exile, because I tried to get my stuff and leave as fast as I could, and I did. I gathered up my things and I left. The other ones, I think I'm gonna need for you to go back over them again, because I don't remember everything. As far as the manager part of it, I actually, if I'm understanding it correctly, I actually went out and did a workout session. That's kind of how I managed it. My firefighter, I'm not really sure. I don't remember the description of the firefighter. So if you could explain that to me, then I can point it out.
Mm-hmm. So I think with the manager, right? So by you working out, you know that's something that promotes your mental wellness. It helps to keep your emotions in check. It's your place of, emotional expression. Great. The exhale, or when you said getting your stuff and leaving, that would be your firefighter, because it was just like, I'm just trying to get out the situation, right? Um, self, I think self would be the deep breathing that you encourage yourself to do, and the positive self-talk that you did. And the exiled was the part of you that felt triggered about being out of place, or people not caring about my boundaries, right? So that the exile is always the part that's being triggered, right? Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right. Thank you for sharing your example, Deech. All right, Crystal, you want to share your example, and then we will close out. We'll hold space for questions, but if you might have to leave at the hour, it's okay. I'll post this recording before the end of next week. So if you miss anything, you can check that back out.
So I was going to go back to just the thought I had earlier about like my responsiveness. Like my concern is about responsiveness in this scenario, right? And I think that, so when you first started explaining the manager, I was like, ding, ding, ding. Like that's usually who's in charge. Because they're like, how do we make sure that we're good? And so for me, it's like, well, be as responsive as possible, which means that I'm responding at all hours. Like that's essentially the goal. However, over time, I've learned to not do that, and to, cut off my responsiveness. So it's like, if I'm not working, I'm not working, and giving myself the space to be off. And so that's, I think, the manager's ready to do it, but I think maybe it's the practice of allowing myself the time or indicating like here's my starting point, here's my end point. Like the earliest you can get back to this is maybe Sunday evening kind of thing. Um, and I think the self piece would probably be the conversation that I have with myself that I do have time, that the weekends have been defined in this way, that I have my boundaries that I've created and I should keep, maintain those. And the I think the exile piece is the feeling is like coming from a place of scarcity in that in my mind I'm like, well, it's not done. Like I haven't completed the process, right? Um it's just like one it's a comment or it's a verbal or it's written or whatever, but it's not the process hasn't been completed, so I still need to finish, right? There's this feeling that like it could be gone or that I'll lose the opportunity, like something will change if I don't act right away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the firefighter, I don't know. I'm not sure about the firefighter because the way that I was thinking about the firefighter when I think about how the firefighter usually shows up, the firefighter in my mind that usually shows up is like when I get like severely frustrated is when I'm like I don't want to deal and like I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk. I don't want to deal. I'm just gonna. That's when I go looking for something to munch on. I'm looking for sweets, or I'm just like I'm just gonna binge watch something because I don't want like that's usually where I see that showing up. But I feel like in this scenario, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm trying to go anywhere else. I think it's kind of like what's not the easiest, but what's the next best thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily trying to distract from it. I think it's still very like we're gonna address it. We just have to decide how to address it. So I don't know if you have another take on like the firefighter piece,
Mm-mm.
but that's what I'm thinking in sense of like this responsiveness.
No, I think you're spot on. I think you were spot on when it came, like, because there's gonna be situations where you do allow higher self to come in before the firefighter takes action, right? So
Yeah.
even how Deech was explaining her example, there was aspects of her situation where the firefighter did come in, but there was also aspects where she found higher self and responded from self. So in this situation, I definitely feel like you responded from self. And like you said, in the past, you might have avoided, you might have emotionally ate, you might have went ahead and responded to that email, but you did it in this situation because you allowed self to take the forefront. Yeah, great work, great work.
Nice.
Yes, yes.
So I was just thinking about just all the different parts and how I primarily operate, on a daily basis or in life, and just listening to the different parts. I think that in life I have my coping mechanism and my defense mechanism is that I've always been working. My manager part is always very proactive and working. Um, um, I've always, let me throw myself into work, let me do that really well, let me keep myself busy. And so that's my protective, that's how I'm operating. Okay. If I work really hard, I can make money, I can do the things that I need to do. So the things that I've gone through, I don't have to worry about that. And then also just painting that pretty picture that everything is okay. I think I have functioned in my manager part, you know, always puts the best foot forward. We're always going to look great. We're always going to, we're always smiling. And to protect that exile, okay, the emotions, the things that I've gone through, um, to keep them hidden so that no one can see them. One thing I will say is that from the firefighter, it does show up sometimes when maybe a situation or someone's personality, or they may say something to me, or they may remind me of past trauma that I've experienced, and it is reactive, it is impulsive, and it may snap back, or say, "Hey, get away from that person," or that person's not good for you. So I think the firefighter is my protective self to protect myself from experiencing the trauma. And then one thing that I'm really focused on is that myself. I think I am learning how to calm myself, to bring calmness to a situation, to pull myself out of the manager mode and painting that pretty picture. Myself is teaching me how to be calm, how to not be defensive, gives me clarity and gives me peace and gives me the tools to be able to manage my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
This is really good.
Yeah, and you brought up a really important part, Asa, is it fear, right? Is it that firefighter trying to say, let's escape the situation, this person, or is it our intuition saying, okay, red flag? And I think the difference between those is, am I calm, right? So if it's intuition, that's higher self, and I'll be calm, I'll be balanced in that place, versus if it's I'm being triggered by something, that's going to be a more fear-based. So I think in any situation where we feel some type of like message, we should say, okay, what state am I in? Am I calm right now? Right? Because you can still assess a threat and being in a space of balance and calm. 'Cause that's the best place to be in, because you're going to be clearer in mind and be able to make a better decision about how to respond to that threat. Right? We don't have to be in fear when something threatening happens. Um, so I'm really glad that you brought that part up about, how sometimes that firefighter wants us to escape certain people or certain situations. And sometimes we can confuse that fear of the firefighter as our intuition. And we want to just be clear about how are we feeling in that moment to know the difference between, am I escaping or is this intuition guiding me in this moment?
Now, another thing I want to say is I was reading like the functions of the firefighter, and I was thinking that, okay, sometimes I'm in defense mode, protecting myself, or defending myself in a situation. Maybe someone said something that triggers something. But then I also looked at the function of the firefighter, and maybe after a long day, it's been a long day, or I've dealt with a situation, then for me, I'm a foodie, and so food is my comfort. And so, sometimes I do indulge into impulsive eating. That's my comfort that makes me feel really good, and then now I'm happy. When it's just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on something versus, dealing with the emotion.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We did a lecture a couple weeks ago on emotional eating, because it does give us that temporary escape, but then we might then feel feelings of guilt, or now our physical body doesn't feel well because of what we ate. So it is that firefighter, because in the moment it helps, but long term it has consequences to it. Yeah. hmm Go ahead, teach. I see your hand.
Oh my gosh, there's so much. I am so enjoying this conversation. Again, just face to face with things. The thing that challenges me the most about this concept, I accept it, I understand it, is I am having a difficult time. And you may have answered it, and I just may not, it just ain't sinking in yet. But I have a difficult or challenging time between understanding when I'm being defensive about something, um, when I'm defending myself necessarily and I don't have to. And I'll say this because it confuses me, because I feel like I think I give people chances to just be themselves, or to, understand, hey, I don't really kind of, vibe like that. I don't like these particular things. But what I am finding is that a lot of times when I set a boundary that someone in my life against whatever behavior they're doing, I end up either losing a friend. They say something triggering to me, like call me names, like call me sensitive or whatever, which I've grown to the point where my sensitivity is my superpower. You're not going to really use that to make me feel bad about myself anymore. But I struggle with that, because I want to know what it feels like to sound and be defensive versus standing up for your boundaries. And I feel like the people who don't really enjoy my boundaries call me defensive when I basically check them for stepping over my boundary. And I don't do it in a way that is intended to bring them down or make them feel bad. It's definitely me saying, hey, I really don't like that. But that doesn't mean I don't want to be around you anymore. It just means that I don't like this particular behavior. It doesn't fit well for me. And if you continue to do it, then you're going to see less and less of me. But instead, I just get people to be like, all right, then, they either don't talk to me anymore or things like that. So how do I know the difference between being defensive and just or defending myself versus being in my ego? I'm struggling with that.
So that's a good question. So, and again, it's hard to know. I'm trying to think of a personal examples of what I've discovered that I'm being more in my ego. In situations where I know like I am appropriately like I'm appropriately setting a boundary. Um, I don't know. I feel like whenever I've appropriately set a boundary, I don't feel any sense of guilt. Like I just like I feel very righteous in what I did. Um, versus when I am being guarded and I see that I'm being a little, maybe somebody's saying something I don't agree with or goes against what I was saying, and I start to feel my kind of guard going up, and then I'm like, I have this urge to kind of defend myself. It just feels different to me. And it's nothing that anyone outside could really perceive because they don't really know your truth, you know? So for me, like, am I reaching and departing from the truth of who I am just to be right in this moment? Does it really feel right in my spirit? Do I feel light and balanced? So I kind of revert to that. Um, yeah, I know that it might not be the clearest answer, but at least for me, like that's what I revert to is how do I feel when I'm doing it? Do I feel like I'm stretching? Do I feel like I'm trying to defend, or do I really feel like, yeah, no, I'm pretty, and it does take doing a lot of shadow work first, right? Because ego can be very convincing. So it does take doing a lot of shadow work at first to recognize all the ways that you tend to defend yourself. And then that gives you a clearer picture in the moment of, yeah, I'm being a little defensive, or no, this is a appropriate boundary that I'm setting. And then just observing how other people respond. Like if some people accept that boundary, other people don't, then it's showing you that it's probably just this person. But if everyone is saying that what you're doing is wrong, then okay, well maybe we need to examine that behavior. But if it's like only like certain people can accept it and other people can't, then that shows you that there isn't that truth. It's not really a truth. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I find myself doing it when I hear someone describing me in a way that I know is not me. Immediately, I'm like, well, no, that's not who I am. But necessarily, I mean, I don't have to do that. I don't have to explain to these people that that's not who I am. I think in the back of my mind, I feel like, well, if these people think that about me, like I'll never sell a product or I'll never get a client or, so yeah. And then it's like,
Yeah.
well, then name my clients if they're gonna believe that. It's just this back and forth thing that I struggle that challenges me. But what you said does make sense. Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, I've experienced that too, where I'm just like, and like where I feel like I want to defend myself, but it's like I don't need to defend myself. Like I don't like it's not worth me putting energy towards, and by me defending it, kind of makes it seem as if it's a threat to me, and it's not because it's not true. So which can be challenging because we want to defend ourselves, but when we can be solid, it's like you can say whatever you want to say. Like my character speaks or my product it speaks, you know. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Any last comments or questions on this? I appreciate all the examples. Okay, okay. So that's gonna wrap our session for today. Thank you so much for joining us for this session of the Soul Powerful Wellness Collective. I hope that this information brought you value and is helping to further expand your mind and elevate you mentally and spiritually. If you would like to join us for our next class, visit drmkita.com/SOL to join the Wellness Collective, and we look forward to seeing you there. Sending you peace, love, and light upon your journey. Stay soul powerful.